que nous ne trouverons jamais une meilleure occasion. Nous avons exactement nos 3 jours devant nous.
Tu crois pas à l'enfer, n'est-ce pas?
Depuis l'âge de 7 ans.
Moi, j'y crois.
With Christina now weak and isolated, we have the basic ingredients for a frightening finale: a looming ghost and a quiet, dark dormitory filled with even darker shadows. Scary as hell. The ending, that is. Diabolique has been compared to Psycho for a number of very good reasons. Alfred Hitchcock reportedly attempted to secure the movie rights to the 1952 book that this was adapted from. Fortunately, French director Henri-Georges Clouzot beat him to it. I say fortunately because it's probably the reason why audiences were treated to 2 excellent films instead of just 1. That's what I call a win-win-win. A win for each director and audiences. But unlike Psycho, Diabolique asks the viewer to hold out until the very end before it delivers its amazingly well-crafted and most chilling moment. The ending scene, about 10 minutes in length, is worth every minute of itself, and what precedes it. Diabolique features one of the most psychologically intense climaxes I've ever seen. And that may be because I was a preteen when I first accidentally caught it on public television. I went in with no expectation from this 1955 film that, up till then, I'd never heard of, and I was treated to a real gem. This is the kind of suspense/horror film that they don't bother making anymore, which is too bad, because this is really how to scare people without having to resort to gore and graphic violence. Modern audiences have been served up plenty of gross spectacles in favor of fear. Being gross is easier. But instead of a brain-dead horror flick, this is a movie mystery that, in the end, also happens to be horrific and terrific, if you like a good, occasional chill. So if you don't object to a good, smart fright, I can highly recommend this one. In fact, if you haven't seen it, don't watch the third part of this video until you have. I'll be sure to put up a big spoiler alert before this video starts to spoil things. The spoiler section will also be listed in the timestamps. You can safely watch this video spoiler-free up to this time, but after that, I'll be giving away twists.
Is it a bird? No! Is it a plane? No! Is it the twister?
I'm leaving a link or links for where you can find the film online, but I can't promise it'll be there for long. As I write this, it's available for free on Roku. The link will be in the description. You can also find it for now on HBO Max if you have that. After you've seen it, I invite you to come back and compare notes, because this will be a fun one. As for those who haven't seen it yet, some quick advice upon first watching this film. Most of us have had our attention spans affected negatively by our mobile phones. I'm no exception. Diabolique starts as a slow burn and is what I've come to call a coffee movie. Meaning, if your attention span has been compromised, which happens, treat yourself to a coffee for the first part of the film. Let that smooth caffeine buzz sustain you as the story slowly develops. Make a treat of it. You'll be glad you did. While Diabolique is quite good, it may be tougher for more antsy viewers to last through the first hour, particularly because it's in French, which means you'll probably be reading it. But if you can't hang, you're missing out on one hell of a film, pun intended, and one of the tensest, most frightening scenes of all time. So again, grab a coffee and allow it to slowly develop. I think you'll enjoy it. Another thing, despite my build-up, I suggest you go into this like any film with modest expectations and just allow the subtlety of it to reward your open-minded attention. This is how I prefer to approach all stories. With that said, let's jump into Diabolique.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Fa 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 fa.
Diabolique follows a typical 3-act story arc. The third act, as I see it, definitively kicks off in the last 20 minutes of the film, and it includes a 10-minute climactic that's worth the wait. In Act 1, we're dropped off at an all-boys boarding school, co-managed by a husband and wife team, Christina and Michel de la Salle. The couple is not happily married. While they're both referred to by students and staff at different times as the principal, Michel is clearly running things. He's the de facto boss. But Christina is the actual owner of the school. Christina's the boss on paper. It was part of her tidy inheritance that Michel luckily or sneakily married into. Legally, she could have the final say-so on things, if she cared to. Christina's passion lays with the school and its students. She's quite hands-on in her duties. And on top of being the owner, she's also a language teacher there. While she's overly deferential to Michel's edicts, at times she shows enough flashes of will and independence that would make a bully like Michel resent her mere existence.
Mais ce n'est pas son argent, c'est mon argent. C'est moi qui paye tout ici. Mais quand il s'attaque aux gosses, non. Là, je me révolte,
But Christina also has to manage her emotions carefully. She feels things deeply, and perhaps because of it, she suffers from a chronic heart condition. And the story presents plenty of confrontations that test her heart. In an interesting side note, Christina is played by Henri-Georges Clouzot. And if you were paying attention, that's the same last name as this film's director. They were married for 10 years until her untimely passing 5 years after this film was released. An interesting nugget I'll return to later in the video. This is opinion, but I don't believe Christina's name is an accident here. Christina is the feminine version of the name Christian, and I think this is a reference to her devout Christian faith, which is an important part of her character and the story. While she's not incorruptible or Christ-like, she is kind and devoted to her own little flock, her students. Michel, on the other hand, is a contemptible, abusive bastard. Did I mention he's a contemptible, abusive bastard? You know someone's a rat when they make homicide seem like a justifiable response to their breathing. Anyway, the first half of Diabolique establishes Michel for the monster that he is. He's abusive to his wife, staff, and the children. And that's just for starters. He's also having a shameless, and I mean shameless, open affair with one of the teachers, Nicole, played by Simone Signoret. And having not one, but 2 women looking after him doesn't begin to make old Michel a good sport about things. He's in a state of permanent prickitude. When we're first introduced to Michel's mistress, Nicole, she's sporting a pair of dark shades, except things ain't exactly sunny at the De La Salle School for Boys. And within the first 5 minutes of Diabolique, we're shown motivation for its action and raison d'etre. Beyond verbally abusing them, this guy also hits women. He's an asshole. The first act is largely watching Christina, Nicole, and the school suffer the abuse and vanity of Michel, who besides being a violent philanderer, is also a cheapskate with his wife's money. In one telling scene, Michel, who has ordered discount fish for the school that's barely fit for consumption, insists that everyone, except himself, suffer eating the smelly stuff for a second day in a row. Of particular cruelty is how Michel makes his wife eat the dish, despite her refusal, while the entire room watches. This is not the kind of behavioral patterning you give to young kids.
Silence ou je garde tout le monde ici pendant les fêtes. Aval.
C'est infect.
Vous dites?
Je dis qu'il y a des choses difficiles à avaler, ce n'est pas du poisson que je parle.
By the way, for those who've already seen this movie and would like to jump to the final scene, teased in the thumbnail image, simply jump to this time in the video. For everyone else, there's plenty of cool stuff before then. After the fish dinner humiliation, Christina sums up the entire messed up affair, second pun, to her husband, co-worker, and the audience.
Calme-toi, mon chéri. Tu sais bien que ça ne te vaut rien.
Je pouvais crever pour de bon et ne plus le voir.
Not to be outdone by his wife's candor, Jerkface McDouchebag calmly sends a Jerkface McDouchebag volley.
Va crève, ma chérie, crève bien vite. On te fera un bel enterrement et on sera bien débarrassé. La boutique s'en portera pas plus mal, et moi je m'en porterai bien mieux.
You
Can you tell I don't care for this guy? Anyway, that's my second anyway. The embarrassment at the dinner and the subsequent abuse that followed pushes Christina over the edge, prodding her to follow through with a diabolical plan hatched by Nicole to take care of Michelle permanently. Earlier, Nicole had floated the idea to Christina, who had, up to the fish dinner, balked at the thought of it, citing her religious belief in afterlife consequences, a theme explored on this channel's previous episode. But Nicole scoffs at Christina's moral objections, reminding her that she had been scared enough and angry enough about Michelle's violence and infidelity to carry a knife on her at another low point in their marriage. Not taking no for an answer, Nicole keeps the pressure on.
Mais comme tu voudras, seulement réfléchis bien. Parce que nous ne trouverons jamais une meilleure occasion. Nous avons exactement nos 3 jours devant nous.
A 3-day school break gives Diabolique a chance for its plot to progress toward its final act, and for Christina and Nicole to execute, that's my third pun, their own plot to deal with Mr. de la Salle. After the dinner humiliation and a violent confrontation that followed it, Christina is sufficiently motivated. The plan is for Christina to join Nicole on vacation without telling Michelle, and then for Christina to call him and ask Jerkface for a divorce, which will predictably enrage him enough to confront her at Nicole's place, where a dosed bottle of wine awaits him. They take a drive up to Nicole's apartment building in a nearby town, where they plan to lure Michelle, drug him, and drown him. This much is not a spoiler, because this is revealed in the first 15 minutes of the film. Some online synopses reveal whether Christina and Nicole's plot succeeds, others do not. IMDb handled its synopsis very responsibly. Here's the film summary on their page. The wife and mistress of a loathed school principal plan to murder him with what they believe is the perfect alibi. And that's a perfect summary. It doesn't reveal too much. So to be extra careful for those who haven't seen Diabolique and don't want to know if Christina and Nicole's plan succeeds, stop this video here and check out Diabolique for yourself. This will be the first of 2 spoilers. The second spoiler, coming up a bit later, is a lot bigger and concerns the aftermath of the success or failure, I won't say which, of the movie's murder plot, which is the basis for the second half of the film and where things get really interesting. Frenchie Lejerque is thrown off guard when he learns of Christina and Nicole's abrupt departure for their 3-day holiday at Nicole's place. From the safety of Nicole's apartment in New York, Christina works up the courage to call Michelle and demand a divorce. But the real sticking point for Michelle is Christina's money. She informs Michelle that she plans on taking full control of the school and that he'll have to find something else to do with his life. God forbid. Baited, Michelle responds predictably selfishly, and he takes the first train he can to confront his wife. Meanwhile, Nicole is setting the trap for Michelle's demise. It involves a little conversation, a drugged bottle of wine, a bathtub, and finally a big wicker basket to transport his lifeless body back to the school swimming pool. All the while, Nicole continues to hype Christina to go through with it, and reminds her that this may be their last chance to solve their mutual problem. Michelle arrives in New York and he and Christina talk. But like any abusive manipulator, Michelle tries to rationalize the relationship and talk Christina out of the divorce. He even promises to fire Nicole, which for a moment makes Christina reconsider things. So when Michelle begins to casually sip the drugged wine, Christina, who is now having doubts, stops him mid-sip and causes him to spill all over his jacket. Upon which Michelle, once again, reverts to his true self as he hits her one last time. Heartbroken but angry, Christina has had enough. And this moment here is where you can see Christina make her final decision regarding Michelle. Quick side note. Vera Clouzot acted in just 3 films in her short career from 1953 to 1957. And this was her second film. And in this, she is well cast and naturally excellent. She really sells her torment and fear, especially toward the end of the film. And while it certainly helps to intimately know the director, she is quite deserving of the praise she received for her work here. Props, of course, to the director, too. After a few drinks, Jerkface is getting un peu fatigué, and Nicole comes in to help finish the job. They carry Michel's passed-out body to the tub to drown him, but he's not fully out, and he resuscitates one more time before Nicole plunges him for good. I mean, for bad. Murder's still wrong, y'all. Christina, who's had all she can handle, gives Nicole a heavy bronze statue to keep Michel down. The next morning is moving day, and they place Soggy Le Jerkface in the wicker basket. By the way, unless you know him, it's good practice not to help strangers move heavy, nondescript shit in the back of a truck or van, because it's probably something really bad.
Hey, are you about a size 14?
Sorry?
It puts the husband in the basket, otherwise he runs the school again.
There's a little suspense and trepidation getting the body back to the school, sight unseen. But mostly it's uneasy reservation on the part of Christina, coming to terms with the decision she made in a moment of justified anger. With mostly everyone away from the school, the coast is sufficiently clear, and Nicole and Christina dump Michel's lifeless body into the school's dirty, unused swimming pool. There is an unease at this point that should seem familiar to fans of Psycho, which, again, I mention as owing a little something of its plot and approach to Diabolique. Commenting on Psycho, Roger Ebert once remarked how it manages to make you identify with Norman Bates' fear of getting caught in the act, even an act as creepy as disposing of a body. In terms of empathy, the same applies here, and probably more so, because of the unjustified hell that Michel has inflicted on Christina. While well-adjusted souls don't negotiate murder, they certainly can identify with the fear of getting caught, which is another way both of these films build suspense beyond the crimes at the center of their plots. It's good stuff, or again, bad stuff.
Why you standing there, man? You can't touch this. Yo, sound the bell. School is in, sucker. You can't touch this.
With everyone now back at school, Nicole and Christina, and especially Christina, are hoping for Michel's lifeless body to float to the top of the dirty water, or to be discovered by the pool guy, or anyone else, and hopefully with plenty of witnesses around to see it. After the kids kick a ball into the dirty pool, Nicole asks for a volunteer to get a pole from the locked equipment closet, a closet that Christina has the keys for. Nicole lamely throws the keys into the pool in a dishonest attempt to get her student of choice to swim to the bottom and find you-know-who. But after emerging from the bottom of the concrete swamp, the only thing the kid comes up with is Michel's lighter. With Christina's school key still quite intentionally at the bottom, it provides Nicole a plausible excuse to have the pool drained.
Pretty sneaky, sis.
Without confirmation of Michel's body, an impatient Christina is rightfully anxious. And since she was already on edge, and we sympathize, at least with her fear, we're on edge with her. And this is where Diabolique really starts to pick up and shine. The pool snafu happens pretty much at the middle of the movie, cutting this film into 2 parts and setting up for a terrifying moment for its finale. With an excuse now in hand, Christina asks one of her employees to drain the pool as she heads back to her class. And with the pool in the peripheral of her classroom window, Christina gets an unsettling surprise after witnessing the results of the pool being drained. It's empty. Nicole, who was considerably more detached and determined, starts expressing her own concerns. But as the more calculating of the two, she spends much of her time and energy getting Christina to calm down and approach things methodically. There's work to do. With Michel's body nowhere to be found, Nicole and Christina start bickering and pointing fingers at each other, with Christina threatening to go to the police and Nicole reminding Christina that she is an accomplice with a motive of her own. You could say that our duo is stuck between a rock and une situation difficile. That's French. Things get creepier when Christina's employee walks in Michel's cleaned and pressed suit, delivered by an out-of-town dry cleaner, a man who claims he didn't see Michel personally, but was asked by Michel, presumably by phone, to deliver it urgently to the school. Well, that's messed up, considering they drowned him and all. The address on the delivery leads Christina and Nicole to the dry cleaners, who informed them that there was a hotel key in his suit pocket that they forgot to return. The key is to a local luxury inn called the Eden Hotel, which is an interesting name considering the movie's biblical undertones. The room number, number 9, could also be symbolic if you interpret the number 9 as both a masculine figure and a number signifying endings. This could be coincidental, but I don't think that's the case here. Beside the room number, you should also note that the keychain is an 8-pointed star, an octagram. This is a point we'll return to indirectly toward the end of this video. Suffice to say, it connects to the theme and title of this movie, in my considered opinion. And if you're a consumer or student of this kind of symbolism, then you already may know where this is going. This still frame is a broad thematic clue only. Things get creepier when Nicole and Christina arrive at the hotel and are told by one of the housekeepers that Mr. De La Salle is a strange customer and that no one ever sees him, and that his room has remained empty during his stay.
Vous l'avez déjà vu?
Jamais, le veilleur de nuit non plus. C'est pas ici qu'il faut le chercher. Faites-moi confiance. Sa vie est ailleurs.
One of the foundational themes of Diabolique is contained within the contrasting worldviews of Christina and Nicole. Christina is someone who, under less extreme conditions, practices duty and lives her faith. Her religiosity, in particular, has put the fear of God in her, which is the fear of consequences. When genuine, this is the kind of authentic faith that makes religious people much better and safer to live among than a certain segment of our strictly scientific-minded skeptics, folks who may elevate themselves enough to deny the importance and even inevitability of moral consequences. And that's Nicole, someone who takes matters into their own hands because they don't believe in anything except the here and now of their own interests.
Parce que nous ne trouverons jamais une meilleure occasion. Nous avons exactement nos 3 jours devant nous.
Tu crois pas à l'enfer, n'est-ce pas?
Depuis l'âge de 7 ans.
Moi, j'y crois.
Christina and Nicole are joined at a most unfortunate hip. So when a newspaper headline suggests the discovery of a body matching Michel's description, it's a thin ray of hope for the desperate duo. Christina visits the morgue in hopes of identifying Michel's body, but it isn't him. In lieu of closure, she gets the piqued interest of one Alfred Fichet, a retired police chief with time on his hands and murder on his mind. He's doing freelance private eye work and, having overheard Christina's predicament, offers her his services free of charge, pending a satisfactory outcome. Christina agrees, and Mr. Fichet gets to work. I don't mind pointing out yet another similarity here with Psycho. Psycho emulating Diabolique, to be exact. Here we have a seasoned and determined private investigator that appears in the third act and promises to make things interesting. Which means we're approaching the finale, and I'll be sure to let you know before I go spoiling things. But first, we're treated to a couple of accounts of Michel's eerie apparition, just before the film's resolution and reveal. During a walk of the grounds, Nicole, Christina, and a co-worker, Mr. Drin, encounter a student doing yard work as a punishment for breaking a window with his slingshot. And this punishment, he claims, was given to him directly by our ghost, Principal Michel de la Salle himself. This account doesn't please the adults, who don't have an easy answer except to accuse the child of lying. The staff takes turns interrogating/abusing the kid before sending him off to stare at the wall for punishment. Before his sentence, the kid insists he's telling the truth, and we believe him. At least I did.
Monsieur le directeur a ouvert la porte. Il a dit que j'irai pas au lit sans avoir ramassé plein la boîte de feuilles.
Tu sais bien qu'il n'est pas là, voyons.
Et toi, tu ignores que M. Soumanet est un menteur professionnel.
Je l'ai vu, moi. Je sais que je l'ai vu.
But the most troubling testimony on behalf of Michelle's looming presence occurs following a scheduled school photo of the students and faculty. What seemed like an otherwise normal photo, despite the apparent absence of Mr. De La Salle, gets upended when something spooky suddenly develops. Upon reviewing the photo proof, it turns out that Michelle wasn't quite absent after all. And the results even managed to visibly shock Nicole, who shares her discovery with the chronically pre-shook Christina. Frightened, Nicole plans to run away and asks Christina to come with her. But Christina, who's been prescribed bed rest for her weakening heart, tells Nicole to go on without her. Here we see Christina's guilt finally catching up to her fear, and she's resigned herself to judgment and fate, in whatever form it takes.
Et moi, je tiens plus du tout à te voir. Pour ce qui va arriver, pour ce qui ne peut pas manquer d'arriver, j'aime mieux être seule.
With Nicole set to go on the lam, and Christina now weak and isolated, we have the basic ingredients for a frightening finale. A looming ghost, of sorts, and a quiet, dark dormitory, filled with even darker shadows. We are at the final act, and now it's my duty to post the second and last spoiler warning with twists and all. If you don't want to know what happens, stop this here. And if you haven't already seen this film, please stop it here. I don't want to rob you of a real fun fright, because they don't, and most can't, make them like Diabolique anymore. This film and finale is a cut above the cheap, graphically gross scare fare we already have plenty of. When done well, I really enjoy a good fright. Unfortunately, scary films are seldom done well, because you actually have to be a good storyteller first, and empty spectacle is simply easier. Watch Diabolique and check back in if you like. This review will still be here. The final act opens with an uneasy, shut-eyed Christina awakened to the quiet false alarm of Detective Fichet's presence. Fichet has camped out on school grounds as part of his investigation. While his bedtime visit is urgent, it feels a bit unseemly because it's so personally invasive. Fichet has some good news and some scary news. The good news is that he claims to have solved the case of Michelle's disappearance. But the bad news is that Michelle is alive, meaning Fichet has seen him, and expects him to return. But denial ain't just a river in Egypt. It's also a dark French boarding house with an undead Ike Turner on the loose. Allegedly. Fichet's disclosure prompts Christina's disbelief, and she confesses that Michelle can't be alive because she, in fact, offed him. She then explains the precise details of her scheme, which Alfred takes in with a sort of pitied amusement.
Il avait disparu.
De Niort.
Mais non, d'ici. Nous l'avons ramené avec la camionnette, dans une malle d'osier.
Alfred also has a question about Nicole's whereabouts.
C'est curieux de l'entendre, moi, cette jeune personne.
Elle a eu peur. Elle est partie.
Ah, je me disais aussi.
Respecting her condition, before leaving, Alfred urges Christina to try and relax and get through the night. Easier said than done, bro. By the way, have you met Christina? At 1 hour, 47 minutes, the kids are put to sleep. The school goes dark, and the final scene begins. It's all of about 8 minutes and 15 seconds of tension, fear, and revelation. And again, it supports and justifies the slow build that leads up to it. You have to see the movie to appreciate the tension in its unaltered perfection. Fichet leaves, and Christina manages to get back to sleep. But Christina is awakened for a second time, Not by sound, but by the light coming in from the upper level of the adjacent school wing. The cuts do a good job of not letting the viewer know precisely where the intruder is in relation to Christina's bedroom. The uncertainty is unsettling, and we're treated to a very effective array of quiet shots. This is cinema. A third thing this film has in common with Psycho, and there are lots of others, is that in this scene, our protagonist is in a vulnerable spot, one that we can easily relate to. Like Christina, every night we place ourselves in the largely defenseless position of sleep. That's fertile grounds for frights, isn't it? This kind of universally vulnerable scenario is similar to Marion Crane taking a shower in Psycho. Christina and Marion are served to the viewer and their predators in the middle of our most common daily routines. As if you couldn't tell already, the finale sets the mood with excellent camera work, specifically the compositions and stark contrast of light and dark. In terms of sound, it's things like the percussion of feet and heels on hardwood floors, creaking doors, and long silent spaces between a few perfectly placed shouts in the dark. But I'm jumping the gun a bit here. Let's go back a few seconds to appreciate this in proper order. Christina wakes up and, despite her fear, gets out of bed to check things out. I've always liked, in particular, this quick, silent scene of Christina peering across the school's courtyard to the other side or wing of the school, as she and we watch the room lights flash on and off from window to window. All there is for us to hear are some floor creaks and the soft, steady hum of the air. Someone or something is back, and we fear we know what or who it is. And the perspective of the camera suggests that Christina is too close to it, and yet too far from the safety of other souls, who are suddenly nowhere to be seen or heard. Christina is definitely alone, and tiptoeing through the shadows of her fear. A scared Christina bravely ventures out of her room as she approaches the other wing and turns the corner toward the light, the footsteps, and the commotion that are being made by who or what we logically assume to be Michelle. And I love this quick little line, and how Vera Clouzot sells her fear with it.
Qui est là?
It's a rhetorical question, really, because she knows and we know who's there, except we don't know what for, which is worse. But exhausted as she is, Christina seeks closure and decides to follow the evasive, shadowy figure down the long, dark hall. In silence, any unexpected sound becomes terrifying. And in Diabolique, it's the tapping of Michel de la Salle's office typewriter that's immediately menacing. If you were Christina, bad heart and all, would you choose to confront Michel, especially considering how violent he was in response to a little thing like some spilled wine? Not to mention how he might feel about his murder? When characters are sympathetic, like Christina, situations like this are even scarier. And the darkness of the hallway turns Christina into a soldier approaching enemy lines. But the way she tries to avoid the light in this very effective shot could also suggest a convict trying to evade a watchtower searchlight. Vera Clouzot convincingly emotes the fear of her character as she enters the office. It's well done, particularly for someone considered a novice film actress at the time. Before The Shining gave us a close-up of Jack Torrance's all work and no play, Diabolique offered its own disturbing scrawl on a typewriter sheet. And then things go dark again. And Miss Clouzot shows that modern horror movie scream queens have nothing on her. Adrenaline takes up for Christina's compromised ticker as she bolts out of the office in yet another simple but effective shot. Follow through with your arms, Christina. That's terrible form. Christina manages to make it all the way down the hall to the...
Over there.
The bathroom.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Jokes aside, in this video's fourth and final tie-in to Psycho, Diabolique also has a thing about bathrooms. This is another unfortunate restroom to rest in, but it makes for one of the most visually haunting images you may ever see. Not bad for 1955 or any year since. As much as I can, I'll let this scene do the talking. An exhausted Christina locks the outer room door behind her before heading over to the sink, and we see her clutching her weakened heart. She catches her breath at the sink, dabs some water on her forehead when she sees this. Christina takes panicked breaths at the sight of Michel's submerged body. Of course, the significance of this is psychological. It brings Christina back to the murder scene. It's overwhelming and really messed up. And things get even worse in what could be best described as psychological violence. The strain proves too much for Christina's compromised heart, as she's literally scared to death. Michel slowly rises, emerging like a grotesque reanimated corpse. The final shot is an almost literal one to Christina's heart. It's a parting shot as Michel returns from the dead. I've seen a lot of scary films in my time, and few have managed as distinctive and disturbing a shot as this, especially without having to rely on blood and gore. There's a bunch of stuff that makes this scene unsettling. The eyes, the posture, the high contrast of the black and white, and the approximately hour and 47 minutes this film takes to patiently earn this moment. Michel steps out of the tub and confirms Christina's non-existent pulse before we get another reveal.
Ça y est, cette fois?
Elle a été coriace. Ah, le chameau. Et elle disait qu'elle avait le cœur fragile.
I'm invincible! You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs!
There's one final reveal that serves to remind the audience and the devils of our world. I'll get to that shortly. Not to spike the football when you haven't scored a touchdown. In the ultimate irony, Diabolique's final scenes prove Christina right from beyond the grave, which is more significant thematically than even fans of this film might recognize.
Fumbles picked up by Leon Lett. Can he go all the way? It's a 60-yard run. He's being chased by BB. Watch out. Did he get across? No.
Ça valait la peine, non? Maintenant, nous sommes riches. Rien qu'en va dans la baraque, qu'est-ce qu'on va ramasser?
Entre 15 et 20 ans de bagne. Ça dépendra de l'avocat.
Oh, snap! Guess what I saw?
I mean, seriously?
Maybe. I don't know.
This ending is about more than appeasing the moral sensibilities of a more moral time, which it did seek to do, and which I'm glad it did do without any distracting self-righteousness. The film's opening quotation served to establish that this film, despite its theme, was not trying to romanticize the actions of its antagonists, and so, like Norman Bates, they get caught before the curtain falls. This quote from the famous French writer, whose work I am not familiar with, translates as follows: "A painting is always quite moral when it is tragic and it presents the horror of the things it depicts." This quote sums up the ethos of Diabolique itself. It serves as a qualifier and an almost pre-apology for its darkest moments. Despite the wickedness of its characters, Diabolique, as presented, makes a moral judgment on the actions of Michel, Nicole, and even Christina by how it chooses to close. The materialistic and nihilistic Michel and Nicole get their comeuppance. and our faithful but fallen Christina bears the unfortunate cross of her enemies. Despite their schemes, the devils of Diabolique don't get away with their transgressions. And by the way, no one else does or will either, because no one can ever get away from themselves or impending consequences forever. And those who think they can are just as foolish as Michel and Nicole. And that's the message of Diabolique, the most unlikely of films, a moral tragedy with a horrific finale. Like this little channel here, Diabolique has a position on the content it's sharing, and it justifies sharing it by the moral arguments it makes in consideration of them. I understand that no one wants to be lectured or preached to, but our world right now needs more clearly articulated morality, not less. Perhaps you've noticed that our proud Rome is burning right now? Do you think that's because we have too much positive messaging or too little?
Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name.
One interesting point that can't be left uncovered is how the French title of this movie could itself serve as a spoiler or a clue that undermines the movie's final twist, at least for the English-speaking audience. Diabolique, without the S, was the title given to the English-speaking market, but the original title of this film for French-speaking audiences was Les Diaboliques, plural. Les Diaboliques also happened to be the title of a short stories compilation by Barbé-Aurevilly, the same author whose quote on morality in art was mentioned moments ago. As a condition of using the title Les Diaboliques, Clouzot was asked to credit the author in this film, which was done with that apropos disclaimer from his book. But the bigger point is what Les Diaboliques translates to. In French, it translates to the fiends or the devils. Whichever term you prefer, the problem is that it's plural, which means before anyone sees a minute of the film, the title is announcing that there are two bad guys or gals involved in something. While this can be brushed off as a clever misdirection, the smarter, modern audience might easily shift their assumption that the devils in this film are not Nicole and Christina, but Nicole and Michel. It's not the most implausible leap. In 1955, this title might have worked as a curveball, but it's less likely to surprise folks today who are quite used to seeing twists like this. Diabolique, without the S, translates to diabolical, which is a better title as far as keeping things ambiguous, and which I think is preferable in this case. And it appears that Diabolique singular has stuck, and that's a good thing for audiences, French and English alike. There's a reason why I avoided showing the poster art earlier in the video. To me, the original title is a spoiler all by itself.
You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
In a strange act of art imitating life, or life imitating art, another thing which I didn't want to mention in the pre-spoiler section of this review, and something I was unaware of prior to my research, is that Henri-Georges Clouzot passed away from a heart attack in 1960, 5 years after Diabolique, just as Red Fox, widely known in his time for frequently pantomiming heart attacks on Sanford & Son. Henri-Georges Clouzot, best known for this role and perhaps this scene, also suffered from a tragic echo of her performance. But putting tragic endings aside, having done a little research on this film as well as on Miss Clouzot, I'm going to choose to remember how well she skillfully contributed to a scary classic through her sincere portrayal of someone forced to face two horrors. One, the horror of her husband and his mistress, and two, the horror of her own actions. A horror without, and a horror within. Two devils that, be it in film or in real life, eventually face justice whether they see it coming or not.
Ça dépendra de l'avocat.
Thanks for listening.
You know, there's only one thing that I'm not clear about.
I mean, little insignificant details. I lose my appetite. I can't eat.
Clouzot leaves the audience with one final twist on the previous twist. With the school permanently closing, on the school's last day, Monet, the mischievous kid from earlier, once again breaks a window playing with his slingshot. Perhaps the same slingshot he claimed was confiscated by Michel just days before. So how did he get it back? Or more specifically, who returned it to him? Once more, Monet has a story for us.
Le jour où on ferme la pension, qui vous a rendu cette fronde?
Madame la directrice.
Qui?
Madame la directrice. Elle a ouvert sa porte, elle m'a redonné mon lance-pierre. Elle a dit, voilà mon petit Moinet, amuse-toi bien.
Monsieur Moinet, vous êtes incorrigible. Vous ne savez pas que notre pauvre directrice est morte, qu'on l'a emportée ce matin?
Elle n'est pas morte puisqu'elle est revenue.
Monsieur Moinet, allez vous mettre au piquet.
Je l'ai vu, moi. Je sais bien que je l'ai vu.
Normally, I don't care for ambiguous loose ends like this, but for some reason, I don't mind it here. It adds a final, unexpected element to the twist of Christina's double crossing, a twist that may have failed to surprise at least some viewers. Either way, there seems to be at least 3 possible explanations to this final revelation of Christina's alleged resurrection. 1. Monet, who was shown to have a vivid but age-appropriate, childlike imagination, is simply making up a story. This seems a bit unlikely, given that he was correct earlier, either intentionally or accidentally, regarding Michelle still being alive. 2. Christina, like Nicole and Michelle, wasn't so naive after all, and wound up tricking her would-be killers to entrap them. This seems extremely unlikely, given Christina's naivete, of which we have insufficient evidence to doubt. 3. It's simply a supernatural, spiritual explanation meant to support the movie's theme of consequences and Christina's notion of an afterlife, as well as potential redemption for those who have suffered from and repented of their sins.
Pour ce qui va arriver, pour ce qui ne peut pas manquer d'arriver, j'aime mieux être seule.
And from what Diabolique shows us, Christina might certainly qualify for the supernatural, Christ-like resurrection this film suggests she receives through the apostolic testimony of Monet. That's how I'm seeing this. What do you think? If you have or know of any other theories, let me know. While there are other points I would have loved to address regarding this film, this will have to do, so I hope you enjoyed it. The next one, whatever it is, will probably be a bit shorter. Okay, one more time, and for real now. Thanks for listening.